Okay, so welcome to what I think is going to be a relatively short playlist of videos around this book. This is a really quite nice 1661 work on the first 5 books of the Bible. So you have Exodus, Genesis, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers. So this is printed in Paris. It's written in Latin. You see it's got some really quite nice sort of marbled edges there. However, this has been the subject of some kind of duct tape crime. These are not original boards, clearly. This probably would have been bound in, I'm guessing, full leather or potentially vellum originally. But it's been through a couple of cycles of restoration by the look of it. And we've actually got a really big chip on the spine here, which helps us to sort of understand its history a little bit. So sort of underneath here, you can just get a peek at the back of the text block right there. You can see a couple of gatherings. This material, I'm not really sure what this is, but it almost looks as though it's mouldy. So I'm not sure what's going on under there. But then we have a few layers of what looks like a relatively modern thin paper. And then this, I think, is duct tape along here. It's a very similar stuff to what's used with certain labels in libraries, and this is some kind of duct tape glue or residue. And I think this was either originally a piece of leather that's probably extended out over the sides like this to cover this duct tape crime, or this spine pre-existed this, but was pulled off by a previous restorer who then sort of put these boards on, connected them with duct tape, and then put the spine back over the top, literally. So at the moment we have a leather spine sitting on top of what looks like the fabric of a duct tape. So the question presents itself. What's actually connecting these boards to the text block? So that's reasonably modern-ish end papers. Now, if I'm going to alter the camera here a little bit, try and zoom in just a little. So what's quite interesting is this bends back extremely freely. But it looks as though we have, and I'll count them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a total of 7 raised ribs that sort of are buried underneath all of this that are actually connecting the board to the text block. And I think these look as though they are intact, which is kind of good news. So I think what I'm taking away from this is that these boards are actually reasonably, underneath it all, reasonably well connected to the text block. There's a little worry here about it here, but it's raising a little bit there. But I suspect we're going to have to do a little bit of a biopsy just to see how well those ribs are connected, and hopefully they're not like falsies. They're actually, they're probably tied into the boards. But, you know, there is a challenge that says, you know, if you've got actual twine under here, actual ribs that are connecting the text block to the boards, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So we need to sort of bear that in mind. So I guess the question then is, what exactly do we want to do with this? And there are several options that present themselves to me. The first most sort of radical option would be to go the whole hog, which is remove the boards, remove this spine, save the label, get back to the text block and treat it as, in effect, a disbound restoration. Now, if we do that, I'll reuse one of the bindings which I've got in the box, and we'll end up with a booklet that looks like this, which would be perfectly attractive. However, it would be a heavy use of a perfectly good binding that could have been used on a book that's older and really is disbound and probably needs more urgent care. So that would be quite an extravagant use of limited resources. So that's one option. Another option at the other extreme would simply be to take a board of the same kind of binding, but in this case, just soak the leather off and trim it so we end up with a nice strip of leather. And then we just glue that straight along here. Maybe recycle the label, put that on the front, and just pretend all of this duct tape and all this other crime underneath just doesn't exist. And there's something to be said for that. That's would immediately have, you know, quite a nice presentational impact. The problem we're going to have is by just sticking down this leather, we're going to end up with the same problem as may have happened here, which is as we flex the board here, the leather's just going to take all of that force and eventually it will fail along that hinge and we'll be back to square one. There's also just the psychological impact of knowing that you've got duct tape underneath a beautiful 300-year-old leather binding. So, there's a middle ground, which is to take it stage by stage, remove this duct tape, remove this leather strip on the spine here, try and save that label, which is quite nice. And then we'll do it as a biopsy. We'll see forensically what's underneath here. Does this paper extend all the way down? We'll see if we can have a peek at some of the underlying ribs. Are they actually attaching these boards as we'd want them to? And then decide, you know, maybe what we then do is put a new piece of fabric here and use a much more harmless glue than this duct tape, and then put a nice strip of leather over the top. And I think that's probably going to be the way we go. So that's going to be the plan of action. So the next step is going to be to try and tackle this residue.